If you're too young to remember 1987, and if you're watching this channel, that's overwhelmingly unlikely, but bear with me here, and you're looking for a one-stop shop where you can gain, in the space of just 90 minutes or so, a detailed understanding of everything that sucked about the 1980s, you can't do much better than the movie Mannequin, starring Andrew McCarthy as a straight guy who works as a department store window dresser. Wait, it gets better. And Kim Cattrall as a young woman from ancient Egypt who, through some sort of supernatural chicanery that's never fully explicated, avoids an arranged marriage by becoming a disembodied spirit who spends the next several thousand years trapped in a succession of works of art as she searches through time and space for her one true love. Long story short, she winds up trapped in a department store Mannequin in Philadelphia, and what are the odds? It's the same store where Andrew McCarthy works as the world's only non-gay male window dresser. And wouldn't you know it, Andrew McCarthy winds up being the one true love that she's been searching for, lo, these many centuries. And so, due to the amazing power of girl boners, she's able to become a real woman in Andrew McCarthy's presence, but only if nobody else is looking. So there's your basic premise, and many wacky comedy hijinks ensue. Oh, and as an added bonus, if this wasn't already the most over-the-top 80s movie that ever existed, it also contains the song that gets this reporter's nomination for the title of Worst Billboard #1 Single by a Band That Used to Be Cool. And the song I'm talking about... God damn it, Jim Eagle, that's just not funny. Turn that shit off right now. Now, to the extent that this film ever receives any notices today, it is for having one of the creepiest premises that a romantic comedy ever had. Because it does get pretty damn disturbing when you put even a basic amount of thought into it, and there's not really any convenient way around the fact that on some level, implicitly at least, the message of the film is that in a perfect world, a woman should turn into an inanimate object except when a man needs her for his own entertainment. So we'll go out for a nice dinner, we'll take a little motorcycle ride, we'll go back to my place and make a little whoopee, and then I will stick you back on the shelf until the next time I get bored. And they live happily ever after. So it might surprise you to learn, hell, it might shock you to learn, that a film with a premise like that was built from the ground up to have maximal appeal to women? But it's actually true, because would you believe... Look, I know you think this is funny, but do you see the host laughing? I don't see the host laughing. Turn that garbage off and please don't let it happen again. But anyway, yeah, there was this guy named Joe Farrell, and he pretty much wrote the book on movie marketing as we know it today. He's the guy who invented the focus group and the test screening. And you don't need me to tell you, here in the year 2024, no product that's intended for public consumption is ever released until it's been focus grouped and test screened within an inch of its life. So Michael Gottlieb, the guy who wrote and directed this piece of shit, he's got his story idea, he's got his script outline, he's got a commitment from the studio, and the next thing he does is he calls up Joe Farrell. Joe Farrell, he says, I want to put your theories to the test with my next picture, and I am willing to give you an executive producer credit if you help me out on this one. And so they focus grouped and test screened every single thing about the picture all the way through production, and even before production. Because why did Andrew McCarthy get cast as the male lead? Because the young women in the focus group found him cuter and more cuddly than any of the other potential candidates. Each time they changed one of the story beats, they put it to the focus group for their approval. So this film that's seen today as mostly a monument to unreconstructed male chauvinism, it came out the way it did largely because that's how the women in the focus group wanted it to come out. Nowadays, like I said, that's the way pretty much everything gets made, especially Disney Marvel and Disney Star Wars, but it was pretty radical, groundbreaking stuff back in 1987, and it had the desired effect because as awful and arguably offensive as it was, Mannequin winds up grossing $42.7 million domestic on a $7.9 million budget. But I'm guessing you probably couldn't get away with having Kim Cattrall play Egyptian today. I think you'd probably have to get a black chick. I have it on good authority from the noted anthropologist and documentarian Jada Pinkett Smith that all women in ancient Egypt were black chicks. So why am I bringing up this stupid movie that spawned one of history's most reviled songs? Well, because by all appearances, that movie is being used as the actual blueprint for Joe Biden's presidential re-election campaign. And I will explain further after I strangle the producer. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where I am pleased to report there's a brand new addition to the secret menu at In-N-Out Burger. So if you've got a hankering for 2 slices of American cheese on a raw beef patty that's never been touched by a flame, you just ease on up to that drive-thru window and you order yourself a Chuck Schumer special. You won't be sorry you did. Unless you perished from a horrific bacterial infection, but that's not important now. What's important now is, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And does Joe Biden have an official campaign slogan yet? I don't think he does. But the unofficial one seems to be, Biden 2024, don't believe your lying eyes. We were informed by our good friend White House Press Secretary Baghdad Buckwheat yesterday that those videos you keep seeing of Joe Biden freezing and wandering off and walking into walls, shaking hands with ghosts, saying hello to dead people, Baghdad Buckwheat says those videos are not real. They are a vast right-wing conspiracy, in fact, and in one of the most embarrassingly staged questions and answers we have ever seen in the Brady briefing room, the kind of moment that makes you realize what a ridiculous stage-managed pantomime these press conferences often are. Some dutifully obedient stooge for the regime who is pretending to be a news reporter, he gets up and says, yeah, we've seen a lot of deceptively edited videos in the right-wing media lately that seem to show the president struggling. Would you like to comment on that? And you can tell the question is a setup just by the fact that Baghdad didn't have to read the answer out of her giant trapper keeper of doom. I don't know if she has realized that she has that very obvious tell, but yeah, somebody should probably point it out to her. So her face lights up and she exclaims, "Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question that we totally didn't plan ahead of time." And I believe, wasn't it your news organization that called these cheap fakes? Yeah, cheap fakes. That is the new buzzword of the day, if you hadn't heard yet. And they are very pleased with it for some reason. But wait, I hear you say. What the hell is cheap or fake about a totally unedited video of Joe Biden in public acting exactly like Joe Biden? Well, not really anything. And the unintentional irony is getting piled up pretty thick here. First of all, in the idea that you can refer to something totally unedited as being deceptively edited. And second of all, because, correct me if I'm wrong here, but each time Joe Biden puts out like a 15-second TikTok video, doesn't it have at least half a dozen jump cuts in it? And no, don't even try to say that's the White House social media team trying to be hip and cool and do a bit of youngster-style video editing. Everybody knows it's because Joe Biden cannot speak English and you have to do 25 takes of the 2-second video, 2-sentence video, so you can then hopefully cobble together a dozen seconds of usable footage. So as far as the overarching strategy of the Biden campaign in 2024, they're going full Mannequin. Just as in the movie, the wooden clothes dummy turns into Kim Cattrall when everybody's looking away except Andrew McCarthy, so it is with Joe Biden. When he is in public and people are looking at him, he's the bumbling, doddering fool who falls up the airplane stairs, but behind closed doors, when nobody is around but Dr. Jill and Baghdad Buckwheat. Just like a butterfly emerging from the chrysalis, he turns into the political version of Kim Cattrall, the strong, decisive leader, the intrepid man of action who can think circles around everybody else in the room. But I think with this latest thing, the cheap fakes gambit, let's call it, it's a tacit admission that they realize the Mannequin plan has certain limitations. Namely, the extent to which you can actually insult the American people's intelligence and continue to get away with it. Because the idea that Joe Biden is only Joe Biden when he's in public, and he turns into some other guy who is a wise, competent, engaged leader when he's behind closed doors, that's a tough sell. Hell of a tough sell. Nearly as tough a sell as a department store mannequin turning into frickin' Egyptian Kim Cattrall. But at least with a dumb movie, the audience's suspension of disbelief is part of the bargain. It shouldn't have to be part of the bargain with presidential elections. You shouldn't have to take it on faith. that the leader of the free world isn't a bumbling buffoon when everything you see with your own two eyes tells you he is, in fact, a bumbling buffoon. So what do you do when political reality presents you with such a conundrum? That's easy. Just mix in a right-wing conspiracy theory. In a sense, they're trying to do the exact same thing they did, and with such smashing success, with the Hunter's laptop story. Slamming the lid shut on that story was only half of the response, and obviously they got a very big and helpful assist from big tech and from the fake news industrial complex. But they knew that a lot of people were going to hear about the story anyway. So they needed to spin some sort of denialist conspiracy theory to blunt its overall impact and limit the political damage as much as possible. Which is where we got the famous letter from the 51 lying, crooked former deep state stooges. The whole point of which was to popularly associate in the public consciousness the words Hunter Biden's laptop with the words Russian disinformation. Of course they all knew they were lying. Of course they all knew this was about dragging the corpse of Joe Biden across the finish line in first place by any means necessary. And for the whole rest of October 2020, right up until Election Day, to the extent that the mainstream fake news media grudgingly covered the story as little as possible, when they did cover it, you never heard the words Hunter Biden's laptop without the words Russian disinformation appearing in the same sentence. And you know how fake news weasel wording works. You weren't born yesterday. Nobody came right out and said the laptop is Russian disinformation, but they couched it in very journalism-y sounding language. They'd say something like, a laptop computer alleged to belong to Hunter Biden, but which some former intelligence officials have said bears all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. And that's all you have to do. Make the words appear alongside the other words, then repeat it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and before you know it, you have successfully married those two concepts in the mind of the average low-information voter. And mark my words on this, it is the exact self-same thing they are going to do now with this latest pet phrase of theirs, cheap fakes. So each time there's a problematic video of Joe Biden acting like a doddering 82-year-old dementia patient, you're going to hear every anchor and every panelist on every fake news show saying, cheap fakes, cheap fakes, cheap fakes, just like the trained seals they are, jumping through whatever hoops they are ordered to jump through in order to hopefully get a delicious mackerel at the end. Even though there's nothing fake or manipulated about the footage because, come on, framing Joe Biden as a clueless dotard who falls down a lot is rather like framing Hunter Biden as a whoremongering crackhead. Even though every person on the TV screen knows they are trafficking in a bald-faced lie, it is just about associating the phrases and the concepts. You're trying to condition the electorate to think right-wing cheap fakes each time they see footage of Joe Biden stepping on a rake. And I wouldn't be surprised in the least if they built their whole campaign message around it. I mean, it's not like you can build your messaging around the idea that Joe Biden isn't a terrible president, so you gotta work with what you have. Which is the least effective world leader of the last 100 years who also happens to fall down a lot and who enjoys creepily manhandling preteen girls. It's a lot of weak spots to be sure, and they've decided the one that poses the most trouble for them is the videos of Joe freezing up and falling down and having to be herded around like a drunken toddler by various other world leaders. So you simply deny the reality. You say, don't believe your lying eyes, Mr. and Mrs. America. Joe Biden is a healthy, vigorous man of action with a perfect sense of balance. In fact, he used to be an apprentice tightrope walker with the Walenda family back before he decided to become a Puerto Rican long-haul truck driver. If you see any videos of Joe Biden falling down or acting senile, those are cheap fakes from the right-wing media. Because Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans know they can't beat our man fair and square. So they have to drag out these deceptively edited videos as a cheap political distraction. Hell, Rachel Maddow might be reading out that script right now as I speak, for all we know. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I do, however, have one more small bone to pick with Baghdad Buckwheat. She seemingly dropped off the face of the earth there for a few weeks, and I feel like she has come back slightly off her game. You know why? Because the specific incident that provoked the aforementioned comically staged question and answer session was that that big Hollywood fundraiser the other night, when Joe was just standing there motionless for an uncomfortably long period, looking like he was filling his diaper, and eventually Obama had to physically grab him by the wrist and turn him and shepherd him off the stage because I guess the Easter Bunny wasn't available. But here's the thing. This happened at a campaign event, and it is Baghdad Buckwheat's normal practice to refuse answering any question that relates even tangentially to the campaign. She does that little spiel you've heard before about, I can't talk about anything campaign related because I have to be very careful about violating the Hatch Act. I really love the Hatch Act very, very much because it often provides me with a plausible excuse to avoid having to answer inconvenient questions. So I will just have to refer you to the campaign on that one. But I guess Homegirl don't give a shit about the Hatch Act anymore because this whole exchange was 100% about something that happened at a campaign event, and which, consequently, she is not even supposed to be talking about, at least according to her own stated policy. But hey, I guess you gotta call an audible every now and then when you have been assigned the deeply unenviable task of trying to get history's oldest and most comically inept president elected for a second time. Allegedly. And you know what else? If Joe does a campaign event next week with Andrew McCarthy and Kim Cattrall, I will take that as a full and complete vindication of my thesis. Thanks very much indeed for watching. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.